All right, welcome everyone. I am going to go ahead and get started. I was just throwing the handout link up in the webinar or in the chat window. Before we get started, again, hopefully you've been on this journey with us the entire time, but just so that you're aware, we are, the session is being recorded, and I'm going to briefly go through the logistics that we've gone through each week, but if you're new today, it's new to you. So please, again, use the Q&A feature that's down at the bottom of your screen that you can use to ask content relevant questions, which will be monitored throughout the session and answered by Karen as time allows. There is closed captioning available for each session, and you can access it using the CC symbol at the bottom of your screen. Everything that you need for attending the sessions for this 5-part series has been contained within the Schoology course. So hopefully you found everything, all the information you need. Otherwise, feel free to email me. Act 48, ASHA, Psych, and ACVREP credit and/or a certificate of attendance for this series is being offered individually for each session. So you can attend any or all of them. Today is, of course, the last day. So this is your last chance for credit. However, no credit will be offered for watching the recordings. Quick note, the first 3 sessions have links to the recordings, but we're still working on getting the link for last week's recording. So stay tuned and be on the lookout for that. For continuing education purposes, you must log in on time from your own device, stay for the duration of the webinar, and then remember, we are now using the code. So you'll have to listen for the exit code and use that to complete the online survey using the link that's in Schoology no later than 4 p.m. on Tuesday, October 5th, but I'll also be putting that in the chat window at the end. And I'm going to pause for a second. Welcome to the AT series, A Closer Look at Access. Today's session, entitled Advanced Strategies, Joining the Journey and Not Just Looking for Simple Solutions or Answers. This is the final webinar in our 5-part series. My name is Tammy Thompson-Cook, and I am an educational consultant at Patton, and I will be monitoring the questions in the chat window throughout the session. We are so pleased at Patton to have Karen Kangas partnering with us and presenting on such an important topic, and we have greatly appreciated her collaboration with the many intermediate unit, assistive technology consultants, and who support the assistive technology needs across the state of Pennsylvania. Karen, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Again, I can't believe we're already on the 5th one, and this time has flown by. And I know the hour flies by, so I'm just going to get started. When I talk about advanced strategies, I think it's clear where we're headed. But I did want to just really talk to you about what I mean by that for today's focus. I want us to remember that the whole issue of access, I hope I've been able to help you understand, cannot be looked at separately. And this is a journey that we are on. Our students are on the journey with us. It's not just they who are on that journey. It takes all of us as a team to not only teach access, but also to teach and support its use with assistive technology and AAC. The next thing is a lot of times people are somehow thinking that our students should not have to work hard. Now, I wanted to bring that up, that I don't have a problem with students working hard. I have trouble if somehow access is so challenging that they can't do it. I mean, and that would be obvious with many of the kids I work with. There's no way they would be able to use a keyboard because they couldn't isolate their fingers. But when we start dealing with alternative access, as with anything, it is hard work. It's hard work to color a picture in a coloring book. Even when you're talking for a young child, holding the pencil, deciding where it's going to go, choosing your colors, that's not just easy. It's not just a matter of just something being simple. It's not as easy as sticking your finger in finger paint and just slobbing it around. I mean, so work is hard, but I want you to understand that we're all going to be working hard. And I find that I haven't met a child who's not interested in the hard work. Hard work means that endeavor is encouraged. It means that effort is required. And I embrace that. And I work with the students I work with are usually very happy to actually work hard instead of having someone else do everything for them so that they can become truly engaged. So hard work is an inherent part of learning. And I will say, when those of us who are assisting people with access, particularly when we're dealing with two-switch scanning or automatic scanning, or especially auditory scanning, which is the most challenging difficulty, when children are learning that, there are a lot of levels that they have to figure out. And so, of course, in the beginning, it's hard. And guess what? It's hard for you too, because if you have not practiced it, you can't see how efficient it is. You can only feel its difficulty. I just want to say, instead of you seeing that it's difficult, just understand that it's a pathway. If I could wave a magic wand and there was really a secretly special, easy method of access that everybody could use, it would be there. But as I've tried to point out, even so people act like eye gaze is now that secret method. Using your eyes to make selections is not the simplest, and it certainly isn't simple to make selections and be able to write a paper. Okay, so I don't want us ever to not lack expectations of our students. I don't want us, any of us, to be afraid of the hard work that we are all going to be engaged in this journey. But hard work does not necessarily mean that it's lots of failure and can't be fun. I just want you to remember, learning to read is hard. Even if it's less hard for some kids than it is for others, it doesn't mean that it's something that happens overnight. Learning to play a musical instrument may come more easily for some kids than not, just like dancing or athletic prowess. But all of them, you can't just go to a soccer field and have never played soccer before and all of a sudden you're a soccer player. Even if you had the natural talent of being able to kick the ball, you wouldn't know the rules. You wouldn't know how to work with the team. You wouldn't know what was expected in terms of what had to happen. So I want us to not be afraid of the hard work part of this. I want us to recognize that it's a journey. And on that journey, we're going to embrace the challenge of high expectations. And none of us are going to be afraid of the hard work that's required of all of us. I want to talk today about the next thing, one of the things of access that almost everybody thinks they should look at first. And I hope that I've pointed out to you in these other first 4 sessions why that is not what we do when we look at access for children, because access for assistive technology and augmentative communication devices was developed for adults. And they were adults who either had an acquired injury or a degenerative disease. So they were definitely losing ground or had lost it. And everybody knew that. So it was then you were looking for a reliable or consistent switch site because you didn't worry about the activity because they already knew the activity. Many of them already, so they already were readers. They already were drivers. If they were in a powered chair, they already had been communicators. So they already had lots of receptive and expressive language. Already had been writers already. So now they were just managing tasks in a new way. So within that new way, then we started attaching some of these terms. I want to bring them up because I'm tremendously distressed that somehow people are looking for this from kids early on. I hear all the time, again, that 8 out of 10 switch hits, or someone made accurate selections, or their accuracy with using this technique. I want you to understand that consistency, efficiency, and reliability, quite honestly, are engineering terms and they're not human terms. And we certainly would not attach them to motor output. If none of you have watched sports or didn't watch the Olympics, I love watching sports. I love dance. I love swimming. I love watching people do anything physical. I'm always amazed by the human body. But I want to tell you, for the best of us, especially when we're looking at times of this football season, our kids are playing in sports. Although I like everyone to be able to play and understand it, the people who really become proficient at it are they're less than a quarter of 1% of our population. Less than a quarter of 1% of our population are those that we are watching showing proficiency. And to all of them, they will tell you that they cannot predict the consistency of their behavior when they are trying to perform. Performance, which they practice all the time, but when they are actually asked to do the real activity, they cannot tell you in advance if that day they're going to drop a ball or miss a kick or not tackle somebody correctly or go out of bounds or miss a start signal. So when we got those terms, really, we started looking again at how we were going to cope with computers and speech generating devices. Again, it was engineers who started throwing those terms around. And a lot of them were looking at that because they wanted to make sure their software was efficient. They wanted to make sure their software was reliable. They wanted to make sure the hardware was reliable. There we want machines, we want reliability. But you cannot start to put that onto human behavior because isolated motor control in human beings is neither consistent nor reliable. Nobody can say at the beginning of this day that today I'm not going to poke myself in the eye. I'm not going to miss a button putting my shirt on. I'm not going to trip or fall. I'm not going to accidentally bump anything. I'm not going to drop my pencil. I'm not going to need to make an erasure. No, there is not a time. And that these are skills and tasks we do all day long, every day. So I want you to understand that in terms of physiology and in terms of human beings, there's no part of your brain saying, this is the consistency. When you get 8 out of 80% proficiency, now you've got this in your brain. It doesn't happen. I told you instead what we are is we are process oriented. We are routine dependent. And what we are is adaptive. And those abilities, the understanding the process and the routine dependent and how adaptive we can be depends tremendously on our innate physiology. Our innate physiology is not just who we bring to this moment, meaning our age, our genetic structure, our experiences in our environment. It also means what happened to us last night. How much sleep did we get last night? What did we eat yesterday? Much less how much sleep have we gotten for the last 3 weeks? What have we eaten for the last 3 weeks? And what about how we've slept for the last 10 years? What we've eaten for the last 10 years? All those things really do make a difference. So we have this unique relationship with time and being in the moment because we bring to the moment a physical being that has a lot of autonomic mechanisms happening in it that we aren't even aware of. We don't tell our heart to beat. We don't tell our lungs to breathe a certain level. We don't ask our nerves to be able to reach certain lengths. We don't ask there to be an increased oxygen flow. We don't ask our eyes to visually converge. All of those things are happening in an autonomic way, which engineers would think was an automatic way. But it's not really automatic because it's autonomic. Autonomic just means it is in its own process that's not consciously controlled by you saying, I'm giving you the start breathing, stop breathing. Okay, so I want you to recognize that as human beings, we are never motor. Here we're talking, we are never error-free and we are not mistake-proof. And if we become consumed by that, I can tell you that, in fact, it generally does not help us because when we bring too much attention to our motor engagement, we will over target or under target because when a human being asks for a hypervigilance or an extra vigilance, that means that we increase in our endocrinology system a whole bunch of chemicals. And guess what? We can't judge how quickly they're going to be there. So we become adrenalinized. All of us talk about this. Too much adrenaline, you're going to over or under target. Some amount of adrenaline is going to help you through a task, but you won't be able to anticipate how much is just enough or how much is too much. So we can't get anxious about something, but we also can't get too excited about something because if we do, those also affect our motor acts. Okay, so I want us to recognize that our motor acts, which includes machine control, very, very obviously driving a car. There are some days none of us, and some of us actually know, there are some times we should not be driving a car, especially those days when you get to work and you don't remember how you got there. That's a concern. But we make mistakes all the time in terms of driving. So we're very lucky we're not in more accidents in terms of how much we want to try and pay attention to something that we do too much of the time. So when even people have tried to measure what is the consistency of particularly performances by people and have tried to create it in a laboratory environment, they can't find that the laboratory many, many times does not relate to a life situation or a life environment, which is why when we really look at motor performance, we only look at it with the hindsight of 2020. We are the Monday morning quarterback. We look at a video of what we did and say, that's what I did? I didn't realize that's what I was doing. It didn't feel like that when I was doing it. But even so, I saw myself doing that. That doesn't mean that I can tell myself the next time to not do it, because me consciously trying to control my motor self will actually interrupt the natural movements of the motor self that will become balanced. So I want you to recognize that our entire lives, every human being's lives, is going to be made up of motor mistakes. And when we come to school, we are not sending you a report card saying you didn't have to erase any answers to the questions on the math test, so I'm giving you an extra A+ because I didn't see any erasures on your paper. That's not what we do. We are interested in cognitive competence. We are interested in cognitive learning. We are interested in cognitive function. So please do not mistake cognitive competence and function for motor competence and function. All of us are going to continue to be challenged motorically, but cognitively is where we want to put our eggs. We want our children to understand the activity. We want them to know the vocabulary in their communication device, how to navigate it, so they can share their own independent thoughts, not just to take a test. No, to be able to be a communicative person, to be able to speak with unfamiliar people and familiar people, to speak in unfamiliar environments and familiar environments, to have access to ideas and dreams, to share those thoughts, to share funny sayings, whatever. We want that to happen. And in order to happen, we don't want to focus too much on the motor content. The motor content does have to be learned, but it will never be the primary move in terms of what we're doing. No one is going to say to anybody, before you text me, I want to test your texting ability, because I know that's a direct relationship to the ideas you're going to share with me. And if you can't text well, I don't want you to write me, because I now know you're not going to share any ideas or impressions or a conversation that I'm interested in. That is not what we do. We want access to real activity, and we have a machine, unfortunately, that we've got to deal with it to get to. And those of us who use these same machines, we are using them in a true augmentative way. We're using them in addition to our voice. But when we have to work with kids who have to use it as an alternative to their voice, think about how powerful it needs to be and how much they have to say. So I want you to recognize that the biggest challenge for students who are learning AAC is not the access, but it is a lack of experience of having any understanding of how the machine itself works. What is software in a machine? When you're talking about really young children, they don't understand that there is software that's been put in that has application processes and that there's navigational strategies. They think whatever is happening is really in that actual box. So they aren't understanding that it's there. I think it's really important that we help our kids learn about machines and about navigation and about software, so that they understand what they're actually controlling. So it isn't just a matter, and not say and walk around saying, I'm giving you a voice. We're not giving you a voice. We are giving you a method to communicate. But I wish we were giving them a voice. But they see, guess what? And when you say that to young children, or they hear people talking about that, especially if we get excited to families, we can't wait to get us started early. We want to start early because we're going to give the child a voice. Well, I want you to think about what a child hears that. They're going to think somehow they're going to be talking. Instead, what we want to say is, this is where we need to be really honest. We're going to give you a way to tell us. since your speaking doesn't work, we want to give you a way to tell us. And I want to say, for those pieces of equipment to be valuable, for them to be understood how important they are, our children need to see them in use, not by just them. They need to see competent use of these machines and how powerful they are. So the biggest journey we have is not that we assess a child better, but is that we actually provide them with better models by us using these devices as well. We know that if you want to learn a second language, and I know there's some arguments with speech therapists, they hate to say, they don't want me to say that we're with AAC, we're learning another language, because we're not really learning another language. But I am going to say that if we were learning sign language, although it's American Sign Language in English, how you get across is very different in terms of the gestures and stuff. So it is another way to talk. So in terms of that other way, we need to learn those other ways and demonstrate them and use them ourselves. Because I want to tell you the reason why so many people say to me, but my child wants to use a hand. I don't know why you tell me, do you give them a head switch? They're not going to want to do it. They want to use their hand, and they'll just refuse to work unless they use their hand. Well, why is that? Because everybody else is using their hands. This is not rocket science. And of course, children are seeing people be successful around them doing what they're doing. So they're saying, well, I've got to be able to do that too, because they aren't seeing anybody use head access. They aren't seeing anybody use an eye gaze system. They're not seeing you be able, all the rest of us, they see us only dependent on our talking. So they do not see us using our machines to actually speak out. Even if we check our phones and we check our texts and do that, we don't then show them how we're answering. We almost always talk about it. I think we need to have some really, really important times when we are using this equipment ourselves. Okay, so we need to teach not just the access and not just the symbol systems that we want to use. Our children need to really understand how the machines work as well. All of these issues need to be taught. So they're not, that doesn't mean that they're told, they need to be taught. How do we teach things? Depending upon the age of the child, depending upon the experience of the child, or by the way, the adult. If you've ever had to teach adults, I know that in terms of trying to teach my mother, she freaked out at the idea of using a Kindle and just said to me blatantly she didn't want to use it. Of course, she said the same thing about cordless phones. She was probably one of the last people in the world that had a rotary phone, and she didn't want to have a cordless phone. Then but we got her phones that had buttons. She could use those. Then when I gave her a cordless phone, she was in love with it within less than 24 hours. She still did not have a mobile phone. You know, she held out for that, but she really fell in love with the Kindle. She still would periodically freak out that something disappeared, you know, but you'd have to reassure her because she was uncomfortable with the machine, not because she was now uncomfortable with being able to navigate through the books themselves. So adults are the same way. It's really new learners. New learners get anxious quickly. Some new learners are experimenters and want to just keep pushing buttons and figuring out for themselves. And other new learners are like, no. Now I'm scared because I think I made too big of a mistake. So the way we teach, we know, is directly related to the style of learning that these children we work with are. So I want you to never forget that access is a huge part of any activity, but it is not just the beginning, and it will grow and develop in children. This is the one thing with adults, not always. That's why sometimes people have such pressure on them to do this one-shot assessment, because they're hoping with an adult that they'll get in the door. Not with children. Access is going to grow and develop just as their task engagement and experience and practice and focus with activity grows. And the reason that it's not growing is not because you didn't have the right cause and effect software. It's because you only had cause and effect software, because you were too busy looking at the access and you weren't looking at its inherent relationship to the activity and the power of the activity itself. You also need to remember that movement is incredibly critical. So movement within the child's chair while they're seated is needed for kinesthetic awareness. Our children should not be still. The only children that can't be moving are children who have already a disease that will not allow them. So they may have a spinal muscular atrophy that does not allow them to move, or they have very tiny movements in their head or their face or one finger or hand or a little bit of the foot. Okay. But in those kids, we need to alter their position, not just keep them in the same position. If you're working with a child who has a C1, C2 level spinal cord injury, same thing. They don't have anything but some facial movements to move, but that doesn't mean that they should stay in the same position. Their position needs to be altered in their seating system as well to activate kinesthetic awareness. Activation of kinesthetic awareness is when there is movement that is directly related to activity of intention. So that means I want to be involved in this activity. That's what leads us to visual attention, not you just getting someone's attention and then trying to transfer it to a screen. Movement within the room you're in, its navigation, is what develops cognitive mapping. So cognitive mapping is the knowledge of where things are in my environment next to each other. So although it is truly just like a map, it develops from mobility. If our children are not mobile, we then need to create mobility experiences for them throughout the classroom that bring attention to that traffic pattern, because that cognitive mapping is the foundation for us understanding all navigation. And that includes navigating your software, navigating your menu line in a word processing program, navigating how things go on and off, or how the configurations that are on a page. So the original navigation starts with this cognitive mapping. Cognitive mapping is also a foundation of us understanding the orientation of reading, going from left to right and top to bottom, although that's cultural. I mean, some cultures read from the bottom to the top and right to the left, but it is still an understanding of the relationship of things that comes originally from movement through our environments. Movement then within the activity, and I meant to say out of chair, I now see I have a typo there, hour of chair, it's out of chair, with the physical therapist and occupational therapist. I hope you recognize is important when we talked in our last session about linking language with mobility. So our children who are not able to be mobile or who have very limited mobility need to practice and act out non-picture producing words, PTs and OTs. This is right up your alley. You need to emphasize the vocabulary and the core vocabulary in what you're doing. Instead of just transferring a child on the count of 1, 2, 3, first talk to them how they're going to get out of their chair, how their trunk is going to come forward, how it's going to be near you, how we're going, and when you get on the ball, tummy is going to be on the ball and your head is going to be over the ball. We have so many opportunities to assist our children in mobility experiences, but we need to attach the language functions with it. So they begin to have the cognitive understanding that mobility would give them if they had independent mobility. Okay. And I also want you to remember independent mobility and its use is how we initiate a conversation or communication. That approach is the way we initiate a conversation. We don't initiate a conversation except now by the use of phones, okay, which by the way don't come with newborns and don't come with our early kids. And even if we did give a phone to a 3-year-old, they wouldn't necessarily know how to initiate a conversation. They would bring the phone and themselves to approach the person they wanted to talk to, because approach is important. When we understand that, this is where we need to understand that, again, OTs and PTs, why are we not in our supported walkers in the classroom? How are we practicing approaching someone to have a conversation? How are we assisting in learning that approach, as opposed to just going out and seeing out of chair experiences and being in a walker as just a matter of going down a hall and a matter of feet or time? No, these things go together, and all of our lives will be richer as we share the teaching and the understanding of this journey with our students who are non-speaking. Without mobility, it's really challenging for any child to learn the power of initiating a conversation independently. And they also, how do they learn the power of using an AAC device? They know when you're there that you like it. How many of our kids are doing something because they like being with you and you want them to do it, and this is the activity they have, so they'll do it with you? And then how many of them are insisting at the end of that time that they want this to come with you? I can tell you, I can talk to many, many families that I've had the wonderful joy to be a part of their journey, tell me when the day was that they were taking their kid out of their chair, removing the communication device, taking the mount off, and the child was able to start vocalizing or moving or staring and letting them know they did not want that communication device leaving them. It was no longer okay that it's the end of the day, like I'm taking off your school clothes, so we're going to take you out of the chair. No, that's the day that device has then become important to that person. And it is never in the beginning. Okay. So without mobility, it's challenging for any child to learn navigation. Okay, so again, how are they going to manage the vocabulary on the AAC device? When you say that you're going to go here, oh, and then we're going to go here, and then we're going to go here. How do you think they understand that? Here, there, 1, 2, 3, you can't count it and add numbers in between there. So again, how we're going to manage vocabulary, we have to understand how mobility. Without it also, it is challenging to cognitively focus on a task if there is no movement. And if you don't believe me, if you really don't believe me at this point, I would ask that you would literally put yourself in a chair and have someone else duct tape you in that chair in the position our kids are in. So I want chest harnesses on, duct taped over your shoulders, a seat belt on, chest harness on. I want your feet duct taped in place. I want hip guides on, and I want your arms limited in movement. And then you are supposed to be there. And then I want somebody to put a book in front of you or ask you to be engaged in task. And I want you to tell me, how ready do you feel to be engaged? You know, so we somehow have gotten so hung up on motor, and then controlling it, or somehow having an adult relationship only. We've lost this beauty of the fluidity of being a human being. All the children you work with have not lost their humanness, their human beingness, their homo sapienness, their own neurodevelopmental functioningness. That is the same in all of us human beings on planet Earth. We must embrace this if we are really looking for children to become and develop competencies. Okay, so just like I want OTs and PTs now to embrace language, and particularly how we're using a lot of the core vocabulary, I want that also teachers and speech therapists. Mobility is not just for the OTs and PTs to support. We need to really be looking at, as we support learning every day, how do we help with movement within their chair? Now, the OTs and PTs may have to help you with some of your kids that are the most challenging in terms of what they're dealing with in terms of tone with their bodies, of how they can do that. But you need to also not see yourself as the most biggest responsibility you have is to make sure you're strapped in a place and sitting in the middle and then present something. That's not, I hope you're understanding. So we must be much more comfortable. Speech therapists and teachers need to be much more comfortable in terms of looking at issues of movement. And OTs and PTs must become much more comfortable at understanding the issues of language. And we will all serve our children better as we do this. Okay. So again, let's look at some task analysis, just again to review how language and movement are so important. If a student is in their walker, instead of saying, I want to, come on, let's go, we've got a 10-minute walk ahead. What about we instead say, we are going over there because, you know, this is a time where over there may be the library, but when we change library to a core word, we start talking about over there. And I want you to think about this. Think about the word over. When we're saying we're going over there, we're not going on top of something. Up until now, over has been, oh, I'm over the rainbow. I'm over the book is on top of, or it is over the table. Okay, but over there doesn't mean on top of. So see how we use those different words. How do we use the word because? It's a non-picture producing. So why are we going in? When we're in the walker, we're going over there because. It's so something I can emphasize, because we want to find the, like I said, like I've mentioned before, these are great times. I want us to really recognize that every activity we are involved in is a learning opportunity if we choose to make it. And when you're getting into the walker, how great it would be to say we're going to the library because we need to find a book on whales, or maybe what we need to do is find, our teacher wants us to find a book on a book, and she may even give us a specific title and an author. And so we may actually going to do a library search, but instead of getting over there, we're going to talk about going over there because we need to find this particular book. So this and the over there, and because all core words that we can't represent very well with symbols. Again, they start hearing them, start to understand them. And we also at the same time are emphasizing where over there is. And so we start setting up again that cognitive mapping. Okay. We also that can use once we are in the library there today, we can say, oh, it's so great coming here today, but we won't be able to come here tomorrow. Okay. So we are here today, but not tomorrow. When I talk about ways that we can also institute some of our learning is whether or not we are bringing, for our little kids, it's great to bring in big appliance boxes, but you also can easily at any age group create a tunnel or a tent with blankets. We just have to have something where we've laid a blanket across and we're going to go in, we're going to go under, we can knock it down. We can pull it back and fix it. And now we're going to do something different though. After we've done that, and OTs and PTs, this is great fun because again, we can work on all different kinds of postural control. Well, we can work on ball work in the tunnel, under the tunnel. Then we can ask them while they're on the ball and us supporting a particular postural mechanism of them, a support with that ball, we can ask them to like pull the blanket off. All right. And what we're going to do though, what I'm going to ask everybody to do is at the end of that activity, let's dedicate 2 to 5 minutes to talk about what happened when the blanket fell. That was so funny, wasn't it? How did that happen? We pulled hard, it fell down, and we can talk about how we fixed it and whether we will try it next time. So that I want us to recognize that helping at the end of that activity, we're starting to again build an understanding of language. Okay, we need to, as a group, choose several words on purpose to use and plan an activity out of the chair. So our teachers in SLP can say, these are the core words we're working on. You know, they don't have to help you come up with the ideas. None of these words are alien to you. They are going to be ones you're going to use, and the activities you already were planning, you will be able to include these in. Oh, I see. I also engage in the activity focusing on the words and their position and importance. So we're able to again, when we're engaged, I want you to recognize that you're not just going to say, I'm so happy today that I couldn't believe how well you were able to hold your body up and reach high with that left arm. You're really getting strong. I want us to plan these after discussions. And I want to tell you, PTs and OTs, you're not used to this. Speech therapists, you know how to do this, but don't always. And teachers, you really know how to do it, but almost always, I'm sure you feel there's not enough time. I believe if we start this process, this can become a clear and very valuable, important part that our paraprofessionals can play. That we're not going to ask them to do it first. We need to do it to demonstrate its importance, to figure out how we're going to do it, to model how it's going to replicate and help the children understand what happened, that we're going to plan that after discussion. Let's write it down together. Okay, so at first we're going to talk about it, then we're going to actually write it down together. And because we're going to write it down, we're going to not only share it with somebody, but we also are going to build a little journal. Okay, so we can keep the papers that we wrote the story down, but we're also able to write it down to share with somebody. And then how about this? How about we video parts of it on the iPad? So now I have a little movie. Or how about I find the words that I'm using now on the AAC device that we're hoping the child's going to use. So what happens is that after discussion, doesn't have to be always one way, and it doesn't have to include everything, but accept that what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what happened. We're going to have an emphasis on those core words. We're going to write it down and we're going to start collecting it. So we're going to develop a journal. We can have a journal of videos. We can have a journal of writing. And then we also, if we're finding the words on the AAC device, how many of our AAC devices allow us to print? If they don't print, how do we represent that? We may want to take a video of that. Or we may want to take a picture of the symbols that we put down and how we sequence them. So this collection of activities and experiences with words and their grammar allows you to, guess what? Invite student peers to come in and work with you in the activity. A lot of times when we try and deal with inclusive practices and we invite student peers to come in, they are unsure of how to interact with students whose bodies are so different than theirs. And when the child is also non-speaking, they aren't sure how to behave. But if in fact you have an activity, so let's just think about this activity that you're going to do some ball work and you're going to have, but you're going to go under something, you're going to make something and you're going to then pull it down. You don't think you could bring another child in there with you and they wouldn't love that? And then you're going to ask them also, you're going to talk to them about, you may actually put them on the ball for them to do the same activity. Why should this activity only be for a kid with a disability? There's nothing wrong with another kid being on that ball and doing the same thing. And not only is not hurting them, they're stretching and moving their body. It's important to them. That's valuable to them. The other thing that you're doing by doing that is saying to the kid with disability, anybody can be on a ball. This stretching with your arms I'm asking you to do isn't just for you. We all need to be able to do that. You could ask an adult to do that. You could ask that you do that. But what will happen is when you invite student peers and then you sit down and start to write, that student peer could be the one who takes the video. And guess what? You could then teach your student how to take a video. The access could be to the photo icon on an iPad, so they could record part of it. But what we want to do is we want to start to make collections of these. And the reason we want to do that is because every moment in a child's day is an opportunity for learning. Okay, now, the next thing we know is that none of us learned something new by seeing it or doing it one time. Oh, there are proteges in our world that might be able to do that, but that is not most of us. And even then, it doesn't hurt in terms of dealing with practice. Well, how do we practice things over and over again? Instead, what I think is you are building a collection of materials that if you have a journal, first of all, the parents can read about that journal. If you're doing a collection of videos, I hope you're going to figure out that they can be on a computer or that you've collected them into a folder, and that the child would have access to those to watch when they were resting out of their chair. Let them look at a lesson. Let them look at something that they were a part of. The student peer may be able to start finding the words on the AAC device and help write up or video these experiences. Can you think about how fun that would be, that you would see someone else doing the same thing you have to do? Look for the words. Where would that word be? Well, this is what it looks like. Oh, I got it. And seeing the natural joy of finding another way to be able to make a sentence or to share an experience. The other supports that I think are needed that I never cease to be surprised at, that when I first began in this field, which I have to let you know, this is already the late 80s, a long time ago. We talked a whole lot about some of the first pieces of technology. We didn't have a lot of communication devices at then, and the ones that we had were quite rudimentary, but we did use manual systems. But we started having we did have alerts. We had ways that we could give someone access to a sound. And I was taught that every child needed to have an alert. And that means they needed to have access to a sound, because that would be exactly like me telling you, hey, I need help, or raising my hand or whatever. So we really made sure that some of the access, that everybody had an alert system that they could have access to. Some kids could have some kind of an alert, a switch that they could bang that switch so they could do a big wind up, because it's just going to hit an alert that's going to make a sound. What happened to that? How come I walk into classrooms now, today, where we have more technology than ever, and I see not a single way a non-speaking child can alert, raise their hand, call out? Some people say to me, oh, well, the kid's what if they do that all the time? Well, that's no different. Ask a kindergarten teacher about the kid who keeps interrupting, or the kid who shoots their hand up every 2 seconds and asks too many questions. What do? We say, you have a lot of questions, but right now I want you to think, listen carefully. I'll answer your question later. So we see an interruption. We see I have an idea. We see the shared moment as an opportunity for experience. Where is that happening in our kids? Where is in other words, the augmentative communication to augmentative communication? When I have kids who are if they're using a pod system and using partner assisted scanning, they need to have an alert system saying, my pod book is in my backpack. Could you pull it out? I have something to say. Okay, so we can not only have an alert, we need to have something that we may need to have a digitized step-by-step, or a little communication block that you're able to get to that says, my communication bag is in my backpack. Okay, so if I hit that and it says my communication is in my backpack, obviously you're going to figure out I have something to say to you. I don't want us to forget, all our children need a robust vocabulary. Okay, so 4, 8, 32, 84, those are not enough words. And they've got to start and build. We do have to simplify in a particular lesson how they're presented, how we're going to, but we cannot limit and give anybody not have an opportunity to a robust vocabulary. I want to know why every single child I meet, no matter who they are, is not experienced in printing and taking photos and videos, not in this day and age. Why are those 3 issues not happening all the time? Why have you not figured out in every single classroom for every single student that they are to print out some of their work, that they are to take some photos and they are able to take some videos? So we've already talked a whole lot about developing journals. I even want us to go a little bit farther. I want us to create some teaching videos with the student as star, including some same age peers. So that means we're going to have a little lesson. I'm going to clearly say, here's the video. We're going to have this lesson. The child is going to be the star. You are the star. Here is the star. I'm going to put a little introduction on the beginning of that video, starring Fred. Okay. And we're going to have a 3-minute lesson. Could be reading 2 parts of a story and listening and asking, and guess what? Now that child has it, they could watch that lesson. How many times could they watch that lesson? I don't want to see Disney videos anymore in the classrooms. I don't want to see Frozen. I don't want to hear music anymore. I mean, not that I don't want to hear music. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I want children to have opportunities to look and listen over and over again about things that would interest them. And every child is always interested in seeing themselves. Okay. Every moment of every day is vital to communication and learning and opportunity. You want to know what the advanced strategy is? Embracing this. Okay. So we only have a few minutes left. And so I want to talk very quickly through this in the last 15 minutes. What are these new paradigms I'm asking you to embrace? Access sites developed from interest, intention, experience with activity, and not in isolation. Consistency is not what we are measuring and looking for. We're looking for interest, intention, and attention. The activity must be known. That means they have to know it, not just be shown it, know it. With the beginning, middle, and end of it able to be anticipated. Repetition of the activity will bring anticipation of motor use and support its accuracy. So in other words, not extending the length of time you work with someone is helpful, but instead within an activity time, if you repeat the activity with the beginning, middle, and end obvious, so you're repeating the frequency and repetition of the activity that includes beginning, middle, and end, that's what supports accuracy. Motor learning requires, when I am focusing solely on a motor act, when I am really working hard with my axis to get something across, please don't give me verbal prompts. That is going to get in my way. Don't talk to me when I'm trying to use my body to do something. However, I need to go into a motor situation with a mental rehearsal, and I need to otherwise have a visualization of seeing myself competent in the task. We learn to swim and say, Mom, I want to take swimming lessons because we see ourselves swimming. We don't see ourselves learning to swim. We don't see ourselves learning to ride a trike. We see ourselves riding a trike. We don't see ourselves learning to use a phone. We see ourselves on the phone. So where are our children seeing themselves or seeing visualization of competency, therefore holding a mental rehearsal before they engage in an activity? We aren't providing that. Then after the activity, we need to make sure we give very specific feedback at the activity's end. I saw you use your head switch and you sequenced 3 symbols in a row to say this. When you did that a second time, I saw you waiting. I wasn't sure if you were thinking you wanted to do something different or you weren't still quite sure where the next word was. Not judgment. I'm telling you what I saw. And then I'm going to say, I love working with you. It's so great. You work hard. You're a good worker. We're not going to good job our way through the activity. The use of the switch must become transparent to the task. So we need to look at 2-switch scanning and the use of electronic sensors early on so we don't have waiting, W-A-I-T-I-N-G. Activities need to build. So we need to start, yes, with some simple activities. And I don't have a problem that you're going to take a robust vocabulary and maybe only deal with 2-word sequences or 4 words at a time that you want to use in a particular way. But it needs to build. That's not their communication device, just those 4 selections. So activities need to build, they need to be interesting, and they need to be complex. So complexity can be in amounts, complexity can be in time, complexity can be in the method of access, but we need complex activity. Mistakes are not only going to be made, motor mistakes, and cognitive mistakes as well. They need to be expected and they need to be embraced. I am so happy you're working. Yeah, we made mistakes today. We both made mistakes. That's all right. But look what we learned, where I am embracing the engagement. Alternative access, I already said this. This is the one where we really need to support mental rehearsal and visualization. We need to continue to create classrooms that are full of opportunities for access and accessibility. I want you to go back and look at your classrooms. I want to say, when I bring you in here, when I bring a child in, where can they immediately go without your help, request to go in this physical room and immediately be engaged in an activity? Have we actually set up zones that are accessible that they can immediately become engaged in activity? Or are they forced to wait for setups? Okay. And now I want to just end on this very happy note. And although there may be some questions, I rushed through some of those, but I want you to just to meet some of my best teachers and some of my wonderful friends. And I want to tell you just a little bit about them. I met Beth Ann when she was 8 years old. She's now in her late 30s. And she started out with a communication board. She is one of the best single switch users I've ever seen in my entire life because she's an amazing speller. And if you watched her write, you just couldn't believe how fast she can go. But she'll tell you that doesn't mean you can put a speed button on her and you can't still deadlines she doesn't like. She wants to still do it in terms of her own, within her own parameters. I want you to meet Hope. And Hope was a child, including me. Every time we met her, all of us were saying, head, 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 head. You got to use your head, head, head. She happens to have pure athetoid cerebral palsy. And so what happens, she had much more control of her feet than she had with her hands. Okay, and so her first success was not really with AAC, it was with really powered mobility. She didn't have any problem with partner assisted communication, but she then was able to use her joystick also as a mouse to manage her communication device. We both love the Olympics, and we both, by the way, have this hat. She and I are friends today. And she actually did go to college, and she is a writer. That is what she is working. Here's Alex, who I got to meet, who was a power chair user early. I think here he's 6 or 7 years old, but for him to be able to get at this joystick, even so was here, he had to turn his head away and wind up his arm to land on here. And he did drive, it was a lot of effort. And everybody wanted him to really be able to try and use that method on the computer, but he couldn't drive and look at a screen. He couldn't manage because the mouse and a joystick are not the same. So I actually, with the group said, I would like to bring a head array on his power chair to drive, because that's something he likes to do. And as he sees how the head array works and that he can drive, then we can use the head array to act as mouse on the computer for him. And what I want to tell you, what was ironic, is Alex did not want to give up the head array. He actually chose, I want to use the head array to drive with. So we actually ended up going that route. We then discovered that although we went on the computer, it was really, really difficult for him to mouse emulate on the computer. And it took several years to figure out that he had some learning disabilities. And one of the reasons that he really liked partner assisted scanning, and his partner through school, he went to a private parochial school with his sister as his attendant, a wonderful team. He did really well because he was pretty severely dyslexic, which we couldn't always identify. But what I wanted to show you is this is Alex today. And after Alex graduated from high school, he spent a lot of time now using his head mouse on a computer. And because he now had no extenuating circumstances, so the parameters of no deadlines of, I have to be done for this assignment, I have to have the attendant here, but he'd been through the experience of school. He now has become a competent AAC user. And this time when I went to see him, they wanted me to come and say, I want to look at some communication devices, and I had too much trouble with interpreting even the symbols. Now I can write, I can do some spelling, and I can use different words. I want to have a smaller laptop with still a good voice so that can you show me I want some software programs that I can be able to use that, because I want to talk to people. Regularly we go out to dinner, I go with my family. I now enjoy an adult beverage. I'd like to be able to talk to people on my own. So I don't want you to think that this isn't ongoing in terms of that children continue to learn. The other thing he told me, not prompted, the first thing he said to me when I went in and saw him, and I hadn't seen him for probably 15 years, is he just said to me, I want to thank you. And he said, because I'm not crooked. And I said to his mom, I looked at his mom and I looked at him, and he said, many of my other friends are crooked. And then we started talking. I was showing him pictures, and what he meant was, he believes because he was driving with his head and not having to really throw his arm onto the joystick, that he was able to maintain an upright spine and doesn't have as much orthopedic changes and extra rotation as many of his friends with cerebral palsy have. So that was the part he believes, that he feels that he is upright. But these are the ones, that I've gotten to know. And one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about the things I'm teaching you is not because I made them up. I want you to meet my friend Bobby, who I've actually been more involved with him over the years, getting powered chairs to manage with alternative access. He actually uses his MinSpeak system with a head pointer. He started out with a head light, and he never really did well with the head mouse, so he still likes using this. But I want you to understand that he's in his middle 40s, and he has 4 people working for him. He works full time in Lackawanna County. Full-time, not basically accommodations, but one of the reasons he really uses the head stick is he has 3 computers and his communication device. So he manages 3 keyboards and his computer and his communication device all the time. He is actually the secretary of his, I'm not sure if it's a Democratic Party. I hope I'm not making that mistake, but anyway, of a political party. And he actually takes the notes. That's how excellent in terms of what he can do is. And I just wanted to show you that, again, when we start talking about a lot of technology, this physical head stick has really been able to help him. He doesn't then wear it all the rest of the time. He is also able to drive a power chair in a couple different ways, but that's another whole other story. Then I want you to meet Mark, who I met out in Pittsburgh only a few times. Mark was always a child who everybody really believed he could learn a lot. He'd used an AAC device early on, but he started out with single switch scanning, then he moved to multiple ones. And then when he started to drive a power chair, when I saw him when he was much older, he must have had 500 switches around his head, and we couldn't even see the handsome man that he is. So I actually went out for a workshop just a couple of years ago, and his mom and he came in to visit me to show me how they'd finally been able to consolidate doing this, because I had written to them saying you can consolidate your technology so that you can use, now that he's older and really knows how everything works, we can have one kind of a sensor manage different parts of what he needs to do, so we don't have to have so many separate switches. Okay, I want you guys all met M. If you watch the series early on, M graduated from school this year, and I asked her mom to send me a current photo. And this was taken yesterday of her with her Toby. This is how far away it needs to be. And she's just such a really gorgeous young woman. And so she is taking a picture of herself outside their house, which she's also been involved with helping there become the wing that's become hers, that they've been able to finally make really accessible for her. I want you to meet Jason. I met him when he was 9 years old, and I said to Jason at that time, Jason, you already could be an offensive, I see you really could grow up to be an offensive lineman. And I want to tell you, he is a handsome, wonderful guy. I do want to tell you that Jason has cortical visual processing problems and was told he would never be able to drive. He's an excellent driver. He can't drive in unfamiliar places by himself, but he can quickly learn them because he knows how to orient himself. What he wishes he could do, this is me seating after us trying to get him. He was having some pain in one leg and couldn't get surgery on it. So we were looking at developing a seating system that could relieve some pain. And at that time, he uses auditory scanning with the communication device. And he's one who taught me, we thought we're so brilliant. We used to mount his device behind here so the voice would come out from behind him, and then he would have the little hearing pieces that gave him the audio prompts in his head array. And he's the one who, after doing that for about a year or two, then requested, since he was a better power chair user and was in the community more, please to put the communication device on his tray. It's just not here right now. This is his stepdad holding onto it, because they were rushing out. We closed down the seating clinic that day. We were the last to get out. But anyway, He's the one who taught me that he wants the communication device on his tray, because otherwise people don't pay attention if the sound is coming out from behind him. That's not actually imitating anything natural. They just think it's like in the environment. They don't even pay attention to him. So if there's a device there, they pay attention to him. Next, I just want you to meet Melissa. I'm sorry to say that Melissa is no longer with us, but I wanted to show you that I met her also when she was 8 years old. And then I'm happy to say it was really terrific. At 13, she was another kid who had learning disabilities, so which one of the reasons why access was such a challenge. She got really good driving, and then she also was the first kid we got a canine companion who was able to be with her all the time and help her open doors and be with her in some activities. And this was her in high school, in terms of what's going on. And then last but certainly, I met Lindsay when she was 2.5 years old. She was one of the earliest kids I put into power. She is an incredibly capable young woman, and she does use the head mouse with the MinSpeak system. And she also gets in and out of her garage. She has automatic doors into her house. She's also helped, her father is a building contractor, so she also helped design her own room in her own house. She asked that their living room have a little bit of a drop floor so that they could have a nice cushiony rug, but it wouldn't be one she had to pop up over to get in. Anyway, just learned so much. And I just want you to meet 2 new kids I hope will also help teach. I've already been learning more from them, and that is Bennett, who I got to meet this year, and Lewis, who I got to meet last year. I can't believe we're done. Oh, and Noah, how could I forget Noah? So these are 3 of my new teachers, because these are the ones who've taught me the most about what I need to share with all of you.
All right. We have a lot of thank yous, and yes, I agree with Jerry. We can see the pride on your face when you talk about all of your teachers that you've learned from along your journey. Thank you, Karen, again, for all of the amazing information that you've shared with us in our journey from the basics to today's advanced strategies. And thank you all for joining us in this journey.